Yes, webinars still work for selling online courses, coaching, and many other offers. In fact, webinars are experiencing a resurgence in the digital world. But the question is, which sells better, live webinars or automated webinars? I've run both, and by the end of this video, you'll know exactly which one is right for you based on where you're at in your business. Let's first talk about why live webinars work so well. And I kind of want to frame this through an experience I had early on in my online course business. When I first started my first online course back in 2019, my goal was simple. I wanted to go straight to an automated webinar as quickly as I could because I wanted to get that evergreen income while I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to run the webinar. It could kind of all sell in the background. And that's the biggest benefit of automated or evergreen webinars. The mistake I made though was that my webinar wasn't very good yet. So I hadn't really run it live to know if it even converted. In fact, I tried to go straight to an automated or evergreen webinar before I tested my webinar to a live audience. And as you can imagine, I fell flat on my face. The automated webinar didn't work very well. So the first piece of advice I would give you when deciding which to go with early on in your business, a live webinar or an automated webinar, is I would definitely say go with a live webinar. So let's talk about some of the benefits of going live. And first, let me just say that there's something special about live webinars. And it's not just webinars, it's really just being live in general when you have an audience. There's a special connection. You get that direct connection with people. You get to actually interact with them. And I just find that the energy overall is so much higher than what you'll see on like an automated webinar. There's a community of people all blowing up the chat. Everybody's talking, everybody's commenting, and it's a really special experience. If you're someone who thrives in that live setting, if you can go off the cuff, if you don't always need a script, if you're good at connecting with other people, I would imagine that you would thrive in a live webinar situation. So some of the benefits of a live webinar, you're going to get direct interaction. You're going to get real-time feedback right away. You can make that connection and you're going to build trust faster. You're able to conduct real-time Q&A, which means you can answer questions right there live and you can overcome objections and close more sales right there by just taking questions and answering them on the spot. It's easier to create urgency and scarcity when it's live because you can have a live cutoff on things, right? You can limit bonuses to fast action bonuses, all those kind of things, and you can have a real deadline to be able to close your program and just actually cut it off. And that urgency and scarcity gets way more people to buy. The downsides to live webinars are they are very time intensive, especially if you're launching a brand new webinar. It can be a huge task putting together a really good slide presentation. Live webinars are typically going to run probably 1 to 2 hours, 60 to 120 minutes, 60 to 90 minutes in that range. So that's a lot. A typical webinar that I would do, a live webinar, it's going to be somewhere in the range of like 60 to 100 plus slides. And I pour everything into those slides, into optimizing every single part of those slides. So oftentimes you'll spend weeks or even months crafting a webinar. But the benefit of that is if it's a good webinar, you can tweak it, you can adjust it, you can make it better, and then it becomes a lot easier. When you want to run that webinar the second, third, fourth, or even 50th time live, you already have that presentation ready and it's easy to go back and just redo it. And in fact, you get better at it each time that you do it live. Another downside is live webinars can be stressful as heck. I have never been more stressed out than doing live launches in general. It is just such a stressful time as you're trying to bring in sales in a short amount of time. In a kind of a cart open period, you're nervous. Are people going to buy on the webinar? Are they going to show up? There's just so many factors that make it this, one-time event that's happening at this day and time. And you put so much into it and it can just be very, very stressful. So if you're doing a live webinar, my advice to you would be know that it's probably not going to be perfect the very first time. You may have lower than expected show up rates. You might have lower than expected conversion rates, but as you optimize and tweak that webinar, as you go along and do it more times, not only do you tweak things that make it better, but you also just get better and better at it and you'll learn things as you go. Are you a parent who's interested in launching an online course business or an online business in general? If so, I want to invite you to go check out our Freedom Plan Generator. You'll answer a few simple questions and it will generate a full online business plan based on your skills and the time you have available to work on it. It will tell you exactly what to sell, it will tell you how to sell it, and how to promote it in the online world. If that sounds interesting and you want to get a free plan, just go over to plan.builtbyparents.com. I'll also leave that link in the top of the description. And one more downside that I've experienced with live webinars before is that instant feedback can be brutal. When you have so many people watching your presentation live and judging you, they can get in that chat and they can just blow you up and really tear you down and say some really hurtful things. And I've experienced this mainly early on running my first live webinars. I didn't have very good presentations. I wasn't very good at presenting. I was nervous, probably wasn't confident, and I just got destroyed in the chat. People said the most hurtful things, called me names, called me a scammer, all these kind of things, and it can be very brutal. So if you're somebody who's sensitive to that, know that that's coming. But again, my advice would be persevere through it. When you do it that second time, third time, fourth time, and then eventually your 50th time, your 100th time, you're going to get so much more confident. You're going to get so much better. And eventually those haters, the amount of haters is going to decline. Now you might still always have some haters. That's kind of part of the online game, but just know that going in, if you expect it, that there is going to be some maybe negative feedback that will help you prepare for it. The last thing I want to say is, who are live webinars best for? Now, definitely if you have a new or unproven offer in your business, I would definitely start with a live webinar. Do not go to an automated webinar because you want to prove that people will actually buy the offer and you want to test and tweak it to raise the conversion rate as much as possible. Secondly, if you're a new course creator, a new online course seller, I would definitely recommend going with a live webinar. Again, it can be difficult the first time, but you're going to learn so much skill as you do these live webinars. I cannot stress enough how much you learn going through the process. So definitely new course sellers. And then lastly, I would say they also work great for experienced sellers. Live webinars, again, just have the highest conversion. They have great energy. They usually just work the best. And so even if you're experienced, maybe you've never tried a live webinar, I would definitely try one. Maybe you've sold your course in different ways through other avenues. I would recommend trying a live webinar. You might be surprised at the results. Next, I want to talk about automated webinars. If you don't know what an automated webinar is, it's basically setting up a page where people can register and watch your webinar on demand. So they can watch the recording. And then at the end, you give them an opportunity to buy your online course and they can go and buy your online course. Just an automated version or an evergreen version of the live webinar. And it's not live, obviously, it's automated, it's recorded. So what are some of the benefits of automated or evergreen webinars? Well, as I mentioned early on, my one goal was to have a profitable automated webinar so that I could have the most amount of time freedom as possible. And that's the biggest benefit of an automated webinar is you can sell while you're doing anything else. You can be doing whatever you want and still making sales because people can just register and go watch the recorded version, which means you don't have to do anything. They can just watch it and buy. Secondly, it saves you a lot of energy and stress. You don't have to prepare to put on that live webinar every week. You don't have to create slides. Obviously, you have to create them the first time, but you don't have to be tweaking the content every week. You don't have to be worrying about, is my email sequence going to go out? Is my cart open at the right time? Do I have the deadlines right? You don't have to worry about all that. Once you set up the evergreen or automated webinar, you can just let it roll. Now, here are some of the downsides of an automated webinar. Number one, it doesn't scale as well. We're going to break down the math in a minute of kind of the typical results you can expect for live webinars and evergreen webinars. But let me just say about evergreen or automated webinars that when you're running advertising and different things, it just doesn't scale as well. People love to be a part of that live event, and it's hard to replicate that on an automated webinar, and so it just is harder to scale. Number two, it doesn't convert as well. So typically you're gonna pay a higher lead cost and you're also gonna get a lower conversion rate. Now, there are some exceptions to this depending on the offer and different things. If you have a really, really dialed in offer and a really dialed in sales presentation, maybe you can get a good conversion rate from an automated webinar. But typically for a lot of people, it's a lot more difficult to get them to scale and to get them to convert as well as a live webinar. And I've rarely ever come in contact with anyone throughout masterminds and events that I've been a part of and different things where they would say, hey, my automated webinar converts higher than my live webinar. That's very, very, very rare. Number 3, it's harder to create urgency and scarcity. With an automated webinar, it's difficult to put a real deadline on. Now, there are softwares like Deadline Funnel that can do these kind of things, but it's difficult to replicate the kind of on-the-spot bonuses and urgency and scarcity that you can get with a live webinar with basically no prep. It's a lot harder to set up that process, and I would say it's not even really 100% foolproof that you will create that real urgency and scarcity with no technical issues. And that brings me to the 4th downside, is that the tech setup is difficult. Now, here's the good news. With an automated webinar, once you get the tech side set up, all the different softwares you need, get them working well, like you're done. You just let it roll. That's great. That's amazing. But it is really hard to set up. In fact, when I first set up my first automated webinar, I had to hire someone for them to actually set up all the technical things, because typically you're going to need some kind of evergreen webinar software. You're going to need a really rock solid email sequence on the back end that's going to need to be connected to the real deadlines. You're going to have to set up something like Deadline Funnel to create countdowns and real deadlines, real close dates. There's just a lot of moving parts. You've got email marketing, you've got Deadline Funnel, you've got an evergreen webinar software, you've got landing pages and different things that need to be set up. It's a pretty tech intensive process, but like I said, the good news is once you get it set up, it's awesome. So who is this best for? I'm going to give you 2 scenarios where I think it's a good idea to set up an automated webinar. Number 1 is when you have a proven offer. So let's say you've been running advertising and you've been doing a live webinar for months or even years, and you've really got that live webinar dialed in. You're converting every time at high percentages. You're making money with that live webinar, and you say, I'm ready to convert this into an evergreen or automated class. That's a good time to do it when you have that proven profitable offer. The second situation where I would say, hey, go ahead and set up an automated webinar is if you have a very established audience that really trusts you. So a great example of this, and this is what I did, is using your YouTube following and sending them over to an automated webinar. Let me tell you why this works so well, is because on YouTube, typically you're putting out long form content. You're putting out 6, 10, 15, or even 30 plus minute videos. And what that does when somebody spends 20 or 30 minutes with you is it builds a lot of trust from the potential customer and you, right? That makes a strong connection. We watch these people on YouTube sometimes tens, hundreds of hours, right? And we make that strong connection. So when you send somebody from YouTube that's been watching a lot of your content and really trusts you over to an automated webinar to potentially buy your program, well, you don't actually have to sell very hard, which means your presentation doesn't need to be that great and it will still make sales, because a lot of people will come in saying, I already love this guy or girl from YouTube. I'm ready to buy their stuff. And so they'll buy no matter what you say. I have experienced this a lot. And so in my previous online course business, I had an automated webinar set up where people could register anytime. I had a YouTube channel only about right now I think it's about 40,000 subscribers. And almost every video I would say, hey, go register for my free class. They would go register, watch the free class, and we would make sales on autopilot every single week to my $1,000 course from that automated webinar. And it was simply for the fact that it was warm traffic. It was a group of people that already know, liked, and trust me. So if you have a proven offer, definitely convert it. Or if you have a following that already trusts you, that's a good time to consider an automated webinar. Lastly, I want to break down the actual math, live webinars versus automated webinars, which converts better and which actually makes more money. And I think it goes without saying that obviously better sales presenters might have higher conversion rates than what we're showing you here. They can be as high as 20, 25, 30%, depending on the audience and depending on how good the salesperson is, the presenter. So this can vary widely, but I'm going to give you the typical range that you can expect so you can see some real numbers. First, let's talk about cost per lead. Okay, cost per lead. So if you're running any kind of paid advertising, especially talking about meta ads, Facebook, Instagram ads, for live webinars, you can typically expect a little lower cost per lead. And I'm going to put this between $3 and $8 per lead. Now, I know that that's a little bit of a wide range, but I've seen it anywhere in that range. I've gotten leads as low as $2 or $3. I've dealt with leads as high as $7 or $8. So anywhere in that range, I think is a good target. Now for automated webinars, it's going to be a little bit higher. We're going to put this at $6 to $12 per lead. So in my experience, typically you're going to pay a little bit more for an automated webinar lead. As I mentioned earlier, people love that live experience. People love that one, event, right? A live event, and they perceive that live event as going to be higher value to them than an automated webinar, a video, right? They're just going to go and watch a video. It's got to be a really enticing presentation. So that's why I would put that lead cost a little bit higher with paid ads. Next, talking about conversion rate. So I'm going to put the conversion rate on a live webinar between 5 and 10%. Now, I'm just talking about lead to sale conversion. We're not talking about necessarily like live show up rates and live conversion. I'm talking about lead to sale conversion. So the total number of leads, what percentage are you going to convert into a sale? Again, one of the biggest things that changes this percentage, I have it at 5 to 10% lead to sale close percentage. One of the biggest things that changes this is your audience cold or warm? You can do a webinar if you have an email list, if you have a following, you can do a webinar to 100% people that already know you. And you might see conversion rates lead to sale of 20%, 25%, or 30% or more. This is going to be what I would typically expect from cold traffic. It's going to be 5% on the low end. If it's your first time doing a webinar, I would expect it to be 4 or 5%, somewhere in there. If you've done it a couple times and you're still running into cold traffic, it might be more towards 10% or as high as 15% if it's a really good dialed in presentation. Now, lead to sale conversion rate on automated, I'm going to put at 2 to 5%. This is typically what I've seen. If you had 5% of people that register buy your product, that's going to be a really solid, a really dialed in automated webinar. Okay, so let's do some quick math on these numbers. If you were to get 500 people registered, and you did that to cold traffic, you ran some paid ads, and then you had a typical conversion rate, and we'll just put it in the middle of these numbers. So you had the typical conversion rate, and you had 500 people register, and you had a $1,000 product. So first of all, how much would we pay in ads? So over here on live, we have a range of $3 to $8. So let's put the typical lead cost at $5. So if we had 500 people register, that's gonna put us at $2,500. So let's write that in here. So we're gonna have $2,500 ad spend. If we take somewhere in the middle of that range, $6 to $12 for automated webinar leads, probably going to put it around $9. And so if we pay $9 per lead and we have 500 leads, that means we're going to pay around $4,500 in ads for the same leads. So we'll write $4,500 in ad spend. So we'll take the middle range of these conversion rates starting with live. So if we have 500 people registered and we convert 7.5% of those people registered, we're going to be at 37.5 sales. So that's going to put us at $37,500 in revenue. If we take those same 500 people on an automated webinar and we convert at 3.5%, which can be kind of the middle range of that 2 to 5% range, we're going to be at 17.5 sales. So we times that by 1,000, and obviously we're going to be at 17,500. So we'll put $17,500 in revenue. So I've done the quick math here. If you run an automated webinar with kind of those typically expected numbers, you might come out with around $13,000 in profit on a month where you spend around $5,000 in ads. You get the typical conversion rate, 17,500. You might come out with a profit of around 13,000. On a live webinar, if you spend $2,500 to get the same amount of the 500 people registered, you might come out with $37,500 in revenue, which leaves $35,000 in profit. Now, here's the difference in profit. It's going to be $22,000 difference. So that's kind of what you're leaving on the table at typical conversion rates for an automated webinar. So as you can see, an automated webinar can still be pretty profitable here, but the difference is pretty massive. So this is why a lot of people choose at some point to go automated, because they just count the costs. They just say, okay, the live webinar is super difficult, takes a lot of energy, a lot of time. Let's go to an automated webinar. I do want to stress there's a lot of factors at play here. These numbers can change a lot. Your cost per lead and your actual conversion rate can change a lot, right? If you're not very good at advertising, you might have a higher cost per lead, right? If you have a different priced offer, you're going to have very different numbers, because what's interesting is the lead costs don't necessarily change based on the pricing of your offer, right? If you have an offer that's $500 and you're still going to pay the same lead cost to get somebody to come to the webinar, right? So you might end up with less profit. You might end up with a little bit higher conversion rate because the price is lower, but it's not going to make up that additional revenue. So generally, I would say when you're going to run a webinar, you want it to probably be at least $500 or $600 up to $2,000, because that's where the math is really going to make the most sense. If you have a low priced offer, $200, $300, it's hard to make these numbers work, but you can expect that your lead cost may be different, your conversion rate may be different, and obviously the price of your offer can change these numbers. All three of those things can change these numbers greatly. I try to give you some kind of like real numbers. If you have some experience with ads, you have a little bit of experience running webinars, those kind of things. This is kind of what I've seen in over the years in my webinars, but caution, beware, depending on your skill level and your experience and your specific offer and conversion rates and different things, this could change. Thank you so much for watching today. If you enjoyed this video and got value from it, please hit the like button and also consider subscribing to the channel. We'll see you soon.